John Reed, johnerp.com, jdod.com. I've got an unusual combination of the usual suspects to try to make sense of the SuccessFactors acquisition. On the left, we have Jarrett Pasahanik in white. What's up, Jarrett?
Hey everyone, normally not this white, and I'm wearing my mentor shirt for the first time, so I'm already feeling a little smarter today.
On the right, we got Dick Hirsch and Vijay Sankar. Dick from overseas. What's going on, Dick?
Not much. Just hanging out with you guys. Getting ready to talk the talk and walk the walk.
Yep, I think we've overcome your technical hurdles.
Hopefully.
We spent about a half hour gearing up, so this should be it. Vijay, what's going on, man?
Oh, doing good, doing good. Looking forward to this conversation.
All right, let's see what we can sort out here. So I guess I want to start by asking you guys to go back in time a little bit to when you first heard the announcement for SuccessFactors, and go ahead and tell me what your first reaction was, and then what is your reaction now? Has it changed any? So let's start with you, Vijay.
It was not a surprise per se. Right? I mean, they had to acquire somebody. It was just a question of is it SuccessFactors or Teleo or whoever it was. I never thought that they can do this without an acquisition. So yeah, it was not a surprise. And pretty much one more thing there. Maybe amongst all the vendors, the one thing that SuccessFactors has that others don't is Lars. Right? I mean, he's a pretty competent guy, very outspoken. Somebody who can stand up to Benioff and other characters who are very, very colorful, right? So I think that's a good win for SAP just to bring him in. It's worth the 3 whatever billion they spent.
So Jarrett, you follow the HCM space closely. Were you surprised? What were your reactions?
Yeah, I was actually a little surprised. I always remember I was at Costco on my normal Saturday shopping trip, and we were on our way home, and I saw a tweet that SAP had bought SuccessFactors, and they were going to have a conference call in 20 minutes, and I raced home and got on that call, and sort of exciting just for the fact that SAP was doing, making a big acquisition, but the fact was that it was in HR, which is my baby, so it'd been, 14 years of waiting for this big moment for HR to be, front and center, and it definitely was. And I agree with something Vijay said is that, they paid $3.5 billion for SuccessFactors, and the whole industry, talent management's $4.5 billion. So you could tell that they bought it not just for HR, and I'm sure we'll talk about that a lot today, but they really bought it to get into the cloud. And I heard Thomas Otter talk earlier this week, and he brought up a good point, as he said SAP had to buy someone big and someone that had a real colorful, strong executive team, because if not, SAP would have swallowed them up. And I think we all realize that in order for SAP to succeed in the cloud, they really have to let that division run and do its own thing for a period of time and change some of the culture, which I think we'll talk about later.
Dick?
I mean, for me, it was rather interesting. It was a surprise. I mean, everyone said they're going to acquire somebody, but I didn't expect it to be SuccessFactors. I mean, I expected it to be someone more, I don't want to say modern, but someone more cutting edge. And if you look at sort of the history of SuccessFactors, it's been around in terms of the cloud, a long time. It was one of the original players. And I think people sort of forget about them, although they're big in the HCM space. It's sort of a niche space. And it's going to be interesting seeing how things develop in the short term in terms of the cloud, because sometimes there's a conflict, or could be conflict between SAP's sort of long-term cloud strategy and what SuccessFactors brings with it to the table. So we'll have to see what happens.
All right, well, Jarrett, you've been bugging me for kind of a long time now to do something on HCM, so you kind of got your wish today, because first and foremost, there's an immediate HCM impact with this acquisition. A couple weeks ago, the acquisition went through officially, and then SAP released a roadmap. So let's get your take on your responses to the HCM roadmap, implications for SAP customers, things like that.
Sure. So SAP released the roadmap, and it was good. They reached out in some back channels to various people and sort of said, what do you want answered day one? And of course came up with this big long list of stuff I want answered, and I thought they really did a good job of publicly doing a couple different things. So we have a core HR solution, which is when you think of things, it's like payroll, benefits, master data, that type of thing. And they made a commitment that they're going to make what they said is a bold investment in a product called Employee Central, which is SuccessFactors version of those products that were in R3. So it's your core HR. So that was a little bit surprising to me, because that's really SAP saying we're going to build a full suite to compete with the Workdays of the world in HR SaaS, multi-tenant SaaS. So, of course, we'll talk a little bit of what the roadmap looks like, how long that's going to be, etc. That's a lot of unanswered things. But the other big thing they did is that they said we're going to do all our innovation in a lot of areas where there's product overlap. Core HR, and we'll talk Streamworks and Jam and some of those other things a little later. But in core HR, in like talent management and the areas where there's overlap, they're going to make that investment in SuccessFactors. And really, they said they're just going to continue maintenance on the R3 products. So for the HR folks that are listening, those are things like ECM, LSO, e-recruiting, performance management, compensation management. So those products are minor innovations will happen with those, but if you want to have cutting edge innovation, SAP is going to tell you you should use SuccessFactors.
Guys, you got any HCM questions for Jarrett?
Yeah, how long do you think before SuccessFactors will be cutting edge or will have the same kind of breadth that core HR provides in R3?
Yeah, that's a key question, because when you look at it, some of their competitors, the Workdays of the world, are continuing to innovate, and in those areas they're going to have to continue. They're going to have to play catch up, and developing a payroll solution for a country is a big deal. It's a complex thing. I was engaged with SAP when they started to build the product for the on-premise solution, and that was back in 1997, 1998, and it took them a while to get that right. So it's not snap your fingers and you have a full core HR system. And this Employee Central doesn't have any payroll now. It doesn't have any benefits. It doesn't have any time management. So those areas will definitely have to be built out, and quickly. And the question is, where is SAP taking those resources to build that out? Are they taking them from the on-premise team? Are they taking them from the mobility or HANA team? Are they hiring new people? But that hasn't been clear. But I really think they're playing catch up a bit if they want to build this in the cloud. Now, the SuccessFactors products, a lot of people do consider some of those best of breed. So on those, they just have to continue the innovation to keeping those products best of breed. But one more thing I didn't mention earlier is the roadmap was really well received by the analyst community. Some of the analyst community that's typically very tough on SAP was, maybe they had set the bar so low based off previous things, announcements and stuff, but it was about as clear as you could expect, which is they're off to a positive start, but execution is going to be the key.
But I mean, Jarrett, do you think, you're almost saying that the on-premise world is going to die. There's not going to be any innovations, but in my opinion, SAP always pushes the hybrid, on-demand and on-premise. So someone's going to have to remain on-premise, or do you see a total shift to the on-demand world?
Yeah, that's a great question. And at the end of the day, no big customers are going to rip and replace what they have. They have too much of investment in SAP, and I'm talking just specifically HR. Big companies, the Disneys of the world, those companies aren't going to rip out the HR and go to a SaaS version, because I don't think there's enough of a business case to do that. HR is one of those areas where there's more. Customers are more comfortable with a hybrid model. That's why you're seeing some SAP and Oracle customers willing to go to a Workday of the world, because they don't mind. And that's one of the ways that SuccessFactors actually built themselves up, is that a lot of SAP customers, there's 14% overlap, but customers like Siemens and Walmart and others, they were okay using SAP as their core and having the hybrid model. And so I think you'll see the hybrid model shift a little bit, at least in HR, where you'll have more HR. But I think, this is a good discussion, but Lars was brought in not just for HR. They're going to have to build a finance solution in the cloud, a CRM solution in the cloud. And SAP just has a few of those on-demand apps out there right now. And that's where I really think things will get interesting, because it's outside of the core area. And that's really building a solution like you talked about for on-premise customers to have a total SaaS version is many years away.
So Jared, in the short to medium term, is this acquisition, in your opinion, good for SAP's HCM customers? Is it disruptive in good and bad ways? What's the bottom line?
Yeah, the bottom line is SAP controls a lot of that destiny. And what I mean by that is, there needs to be integration between the products. So when one down, when SAP customers buy an SAP product, they expect it to integrate with other SAP products. So let me give you an example here. If I'm an SAP customer and I buy SuccessFactors, I expect the integration to be there. And SAP doesn't have that today. All those customers where there was overlap have built that themselves. So that's really one. When is integration coming? Two, does SAP charge for that integration, or do they deliver some type of pre-delivered certified integration? And then the other is, how do you handle that the two companies are totally different companies, even though they're under the SAP umbrella? So in core HR, you may have 25 fields that there's no home for in SuccessFactors. How does that get built? How do the teams work together? So I've been telling my customers, it's best to wait and see. Let's see how this shakes out. Let's see what type of integrations there. Are there going to be price increases with SuccessFactors? I mean, there's just so many different variables. I really just think it's too early to tell. But also, I think that if SAP doesn't have an answer for a lot of these, by the time we're there at Sapphire, it's going to be. I think there's going to be a lot of disappointment in the marketplace.
Mm. Dick, welcome back. Do we have sound for you?
Thanks.
Oh, yeah, there we go. Yeah,
cool.
You're good.
Thanks.
Okay, so let's shift a little bit to the bigger cloud implications. Steve Bugner did a podcast earlier this week with the HCM team that Jarrett's on for the podcast series, though Jarrett, you weren't on this podcast, but it was with Thomas Otter. Thomas said something I both agreed with and disagreed with. He said, essentially, that SAP paid a premium for SuccessFactors not because it was HCM, but because it's a huge sort of cloud DNA play for SAP to get a much better handle on cloud economics and cloud culture, to essentially shake up their enterprise and pursue a broader cloud strategy, jumpstart that. But he also said that it didn't really matter whether it was an HCM or CRM or procurement acquisition so much. It was more about making this cloud transition. Now, I would argue that HCM was a key part of this, only because Workday, I view this acquisition largely, not totally, but largely as somewhat of a defensive response to Workday. I think SAP doesn't want to get Salesforced again the way it did in CRM earlier in this decade. And I think even though Workday doesn't totally overlap with what SuccessFactors does, my opinion is that's a key part of what this acquisition was for. But at the same time, I do agree with Thomas, aka Venterprise, that this is really less about HCM in the long run and more about transforming SAP's approach to the cloud. Whether that will work out, I don't know. Let's hear some reactions.
Well, the one thing that was always interesting to me was to remember SuccessFactors has been around a long time, and they have a great deal of experience being successful in the cloud, and that's a benefit, but also a handicap when you're trying to bring that into SAP, because it could be, for example, in terms of the processes that are behind the success in the cloud, that there are conflicts between what SAP already has in the on-demand world and what SuccessFactors has done. Might not be technology, that might just be the processes involved. And so that's going to be curious to see how these two worlds come together. I mean, it might actually be a culture clash.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I couldn't agree with you more, John, about the Workday. I just don't believe if Workday wasn't there, I don't believe that SAP is that interested in the cloud. And when you look at it, Workday's looking to expand out there. They're looking to get, they're building that solution that has 65, 70 customers for finance right now. So they're using HR as a means to get into the enterprise. And once you get HR and you get finance, you can do some real damage to SAP there. So, I mean, SAP is the market leader right now. They were the market leader before this acquisition. They have about an 18% share of the HR market worldwide, and SuccessFactors puts that up to like 21%. So, but I think the key is looking at this longer term. This is a bit of a defensive play, and Workday's a really formidable competitor.
Yeah, definitely a defensive play. I agree. I think the offensive part of this play is pretty much when Lars heads up cloud and goes after all these competitor firms. I think that's where the offense comes. although all this said and done, I mean, I was very closely affected, since I'm a BI guy, right? When SAP bought business objects, those roadmap discussions, many years later are still continuing. There's always a question of what is coming in FP3. Was there an FP1 and an FP2 before an FP3, right? I mean, there are all kinds of such questions that many years later are still not resolved. And there are two organizations that are taking some time to merge together. Then, Sybase got acquired. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how well integrated is Sybase when you look from outside. Is Sybase now has an SAP culture, or does SAP have a Sybase culture? Are they both independent? Those kinds of things, I can't expect it to be any different for cloud. DNA is not something you can buy, right? I mean, it's very, very difficult for me to believe that you can buy DNA. SAP is the big brother in this equation, right? I mean, they are many times bigger than SuccessFactors. So just by buying it, I don't know whether they will get that DNA and will start doing things differently. If Lars needs more developers, it has to come from some other part of SAP. Would they take off development from HANA or mobility or something else to give it to the cloud team? Don't know. I mean, it remains to be seen. But those are all things that SAP has to clarify at Sapphire, which is just a couple of months away.
I mean, I think it's going to be curious to see how Lars really responds to the SAP organization, because he's going to be heading the cloud organization. What that exactly means, I'm not really sure. And I'd be curious to see how he responds to the problems and the challenges that SAP is going through right now in the on-demand world, and how he's going to bring his own experiences from SuccessFactors and try and apply those to his new hierarchy. Good luck, I say.
Yeah, something I found interesting was, when the day the roadmap was announced, SuccessFactors, an email went out to Lars to a lot of SAP customers, and several SAP customers weren't that familiar with SuccessFactors. So, that whether that was approved up or not, or that was done, I mean, that some of my friends are at some very big customers that have made multi-million-dollar investments in certain areas of HR, and when they're hearing from what they perceive as, maybe they saw the news, maybe they didn't, but when they're hearing, your product you spent all this money on is now, for all intents and purposes, no innovation going forward, that's disruptive. I had a few friends reach out and say it almost feels like SuccessFactors bought SAP. And I stood back a little bit and I thought about that, and I told them, you know what? In order for this to really work, that might be what has to happen for a little while, because for all intents and purposes, you've seen how SAP has just put one little foot in the water for the cloud. You know what I mean? Like, business by design was always, it's going to be, for your subsidiary or for your small company. They really made a point not to step on the toes of anything that was licensed, anything that was on-premise licensed. And you saw the on-demand. We all love a lot of their products, but they were really slow to market. And in order to get that scale, they needed to buy someone, and it really, I don't know, they just needed to be very aggressive, and it's just going to be interesting to watch.
Well, Jared, I think you raised a really interesting point in terms of the line of business on demand solutions SAP was working on, because clearly SAP was having a lot of trouble scaling those solutions, and we all wondered just how committed SAP was in the long run to scaling them out. But in terms of the design approaches and the UI experience, I don't know about you guys, but I was impressed by each one of these products that I saw. Now, obviously, we realize, though it has not been made official, that the future of career on demand is there is no future there. And we all believe that. There's nothing official that's been said, so we should be clear about that. But I'm particularly interested in that, and I don't know about you guys, because I think the design thinking methodologies and the result of those from a user experience standpoint were quite strong, but that's not Lars's vision, and Lars may have some idea about how to scale that, but does he buy into the design approaches, or is he going to bring a whole different mentality? That's going to be a really interesting plot to watch.
Yeah, and one of the things, John, that brings up an interesting point is each one of those products was an add-on product. It wasn't looking to take away any existing revenue. So if you come back to imagine in 3 years from now, they build out Employee Central and they have a full SaaS solution. A lot of customers, there's customers that really want a SaaS solution, and there's customers that really want an on-premise solution. But I think there's a good subset of customers that just want the right solution. They want to understand what's the right one for their business. And if they do this right, you could easily see a scenario where you have an SAP sales team going to a client, and you have a SuccessFactors subsidiary, SuccessFactors as of SAP coming in and competing for the same deal, and that's where we'll really know that SAP is really serious on the cloud when they'll let that type of thing occur.
VJ, I wanted to ask you about this because you recently wrote a blog post about how you're seeing a bit of a boom in on-premise ERP sales, and so the question then becomes, on top of the design approach, it's the go-to-market approach that Jarrett raised. Is SAP really going to want to go all in on the cloud when their on-premise sales are going well? I mean, what are your thoughts?
I don't think there is any incentive for SAP to cannibalize their on-premises licenses, right? I mean, it's a growing market. If there is money on the table, I don't think they will go overboard and say, okay, don't spend this on premises. There is this cheaper cloud offering. What might happen, and it's only a guess, right? I mean, it's just my version of how things might work out, is eventually SAP builds out, let's say 2 years from now, full SaaS solution for HR, and then gives all kinds of conversion routines and interfaces and so on to move your core HR to cloud, where you have an existing investment and then there is low TCO, but then it's all seat based and so on. Then I can see SAP pushing it big time. But in this model where both solutions are available, I don't know. It doesn't seem to make economic sense for SAP to cannibalize.
But I mean, I think what we have to remember as well, we saw this in Boston, that SAP is truly building an on-demand sales staff. I blogged about this like a month ago. They have a huge number of openings for sales staff who just do on-demand. So there's definitely going to be a push coming. That's to be expected.
And we've already seen the articles stating they're going to be the cloud leader by 2013. So they've got a lot of time to hit those bold statements. But I guess if they're going turbocharged down the highway at 200 miles an hour, maybe they can.
Yeah, I mean, Greg Tom was brought back to SAP to lead up that organization, Dick, and he certainly sounded jazzed up at the Influencer Summit. So perhaps he can lay some new ground there. It'd be interesting to see how that plays out.
Absolutely. I mean, he is by far the best guy for that job, and he is doing the right thing by having a focused sales force just for that. But all those announcements came before the SuccessFactors thing was disclosed, right? And well,
it was disclosed, but they couldn't talk about it.
Organization before SuccessFactors was announced.
Right.
Now, it is a big challenge for him, even without SuccessFactors. He has to fight against another sales force that is heavily incented to sell on-premises software, who has had deeper relationships with customers and so on, right? So it happens in all companies. It's not just an SAP specific problem. If there is one revenue stream that's pretty good, the incumbent sales guy might not let his friend come in and sell. It remains to be seen.
Yeah, and I think we really need to see some of the organizational hierarchy as well to understand if there's an issue, who makes that final decision. Because especially in areas where there's an on-premise team working with where there's duplicate offerings, etc., who makes the final decision on what those look like, what gets sold, etc. I mean, I'm sure from Lars it's a very straight line as to how that decision-making process goes, but slightly down where a lot of the other decisions are made at the vice president level and down from there, how does that look? How does that look when we're talking Jam and Streamworks and how that's being sold and how that's being integrated in the products, things like that. It's just that's going to be interesting to see who has the final decision, and is it always money-based as to SAP takes where the most money's on the table, or do they look longer term at this and say, you know what, if we can get some people, more customers on the subscription model, that's going to help us protect our moats, more to speak. So.
Wasn't there a recent, wasn't it like 2 days ago, I think it was one of the CEOs said that by, I think 2015, they're going to have this amazing amount of subscription-based sales. Did you guys see that?
Yeah, Jim Snabe did that, yeah.
Right, exactly. So they are aware that things have to change, and I think that's one of the reasons why they're going external to get these on-demand salespeople, because the on-premise people, on-premise sales staff, I think they maybe the incorrect mentality to deal with these subscription-based sales.
But I also saw Dennis Howlitz that he talked to Jim Snabe, and he had a way to make money in the cloud. And with the way the economics work and the way that Wall Street metrics work, that most of the cloud vendors don't make any money. So the question would be where is the secret sauce that SAP, has figured out to suddenly make more money? Is it raising
Success factors.
raising the licensing costs like they did with some of the other products they bought, or is there some other way? Because even SuccessFactors was making it might have been a small loss or a minimal profit, but it was very small, and obviously Salesforce.com doesn't make any money on paper, so there's some interesting things there. And as that grows, how does that look to Wall Street that's used to, hitting a number, and all of a sudden that number sort of changes, the EPS changes lower due to more subscription revenue? How do the CEOs, how do they handle that? How does Wall Street handle the evolution of SAP?
Jarrett, you're really taking sexy out of the cloud, man. This is not working for me at all. So I want to throw another iron in the fire, which is the technical integration piece that Dick, you've blogged. You've been
Right.
way ahead of the curve on this part of it, speculating in informed ways, I guess we could say. But to me, this is a really big issue, and
Right.
it ties into a misconception some people have about success factors, in my opinion. Because I hear some people say SAP bought the platform, but when I look at
Right.
the success factors platform, I don't see a thriving developer ecosystem. I don't
Right.
see thousands of add-on apps. I don't see publicly available APIs and documentation
Right.
around
They don't
development.
exist.
And in fact, I would make the argument that on the SAP side, they were already making significant forward progress around their on-demand platform, which
Right.
includes both an ABAP environment and a Java or JPass environment that you're very familiar with.
Right.
So this sets up a really interesting drama to me because, in my opinion, the winner of the enterprise cloud game is going to be the companies with the best developer ecosystems around their products. You could liken it to what happened in the consumer space where Apple and Android have thrived because of that, and BlackBerry is in free fall for the same RIM is in free fall for the same reason. So
Right.
my view is this is incredibly important, and I think people need to understand that buying success factors might get SAP into the cloud game, but it doesn't necessarily get them into the platform and developer cloud
Right.
development. So you've really kicked tires on this. What are your thoughts?
Right. I mean, first of all, I think we have to remember that SuccessFactors is really more of a SaaS than a PaaS. I mean, they have niche applications, but they really don't have a platform that you could describe as being a platform as a service. So that's one of the distinctions between SuccessFactors and SAP is that SuccessFactors just they have partners. I'm not saying they don't have partners, but they have a much smaller ecosystem and it's much more closed, as you said, as SAP. And as I looked at the technology that they have, it's not that they have technology that's not changing, but they have technology that is very standardized, Java, JBoss, and if you look at the things that are currently being used in the SAP on-demand world, they are, I wouldn't say cutting edge, but they are more cutting edge. Um, and so it's going to be a little bit of a conflict when Lars is now heading the cloud department, the cloud organization. Which way is he going to go? Is he going to more or less use his technology, which he's used to, which he has experience with, or is he going to try and use the more platform as a service focus that SAP has right now? And there was one very interesting quote that Lars did right after the acquisition was announced, where he says, "They have all this IP. I can't wait to get this on our technology." So the question is going to be who's really going to win. I mean, SAP always says we bought SuccessFactors for the cloud DNA. Does that mean that they're going to be moving their applications to the SuccessFactors environment, or will things coexist side by side? So this is all going to be very interesting to see how things develop. And I think initially what's going to happen is that you will see both worlds exist more or less side by side. What happens in 2 years is going to be interesting, because what people don't know is that SuccessFactors had a deal with Cloud Foundry about, I think, like half a year ago. So that's very similar to what the Java PaaS could offer to SuccessFactors. So this shift is going to be curious. It's going to be interesting to watch and see how things develop. Um,
Well, yeah, especially because Lars's quote about the IP, it goes in contrast to some of the things I've heard Vishal Sikka say about how
right.
he sees SuccessFactors plugging in nicely into SAP's JPass framework, which I've never heard Lars say that. Now,
Right.
admittedly, Lars hasn't really spoken publicly about SAP yet, so we got to give that time to play out. But it's going to be interesting to watch that, right?
Right, because I mean, you have to realize that they have a successful system. They have an architecture that they've been working on for years. Okay, why would they move from a successful architecture to JPOS, which is now in beta? I'm not saying it's bad, but they have all this experience and all the success based on one platform. It'd have to be pretty excellent reasons for them to shift to the Java world. Of course, the similarity is there, the common Java common Java language. But everything on top of that, I think you're right. I think it's going to be curious to see what Lars has to say about that.
Welcome to SAP, Lars.
But there is an advantage too, right? So the two things where SAP might find an easier integration is one is HANA, the other is mobility.
Mm-hmm.
HANA might get a chance to mature much more quickly if it becomes the database for SuccessFactors, because it's kind of isolated, and HANA's whatever problems it has can be ironed out very quickly in isolation and make it a very industrial strength database very quickly by, if that is the direction, right? If it becomes the database for SuccessFactors as opposed to Business Suite and every other thing that SAP has, this will be a much more low risk option, and they can hopefully get there much quickly. Same with Sybase. Since it's a layer on top, it doesn't really affect any of these platform changes all that. Well, that it does affect, right? Because exposing services has some limitations based on the technology that Dick just mentioned, but relatively easy compared to a big change of which platform to choose, right? I mean, that's a much bigger problem to address.
Yeah, and Vijay, I have just a question on that, and then more of a comment. One of the question is, we all know Workday runs right now. It's multi-tenant SaaS in memory. So if SAP comes and puts SuccessFactors in HANA, from a customer standpoint, would you envision customers seeing? I envision them seeing apples to apples, so to speak, even though it's not going to be that way deep down. Is that a differentiator from SuccessFactors running on HANA versus Workday running in memory? So that's the one. I'm curious to get your thoughts. And then the other really is, I don't see as much of a mobility play for SuccessFactors as maybe some other ones do, at least initially, because a lot of the HR SaaS vendors give away their mobility options for free. They're part of the subscription. So if SAP comes in and tries to monetize that in any way, I just see that has disaster written all over it. I mean, they have to give their customers free mobility apps in HR anyways, just due to competitive pressures. And so I'll be curious to see how the mobility is integrated with that, because it seems like they have their hands full on the on-premise side, getting that thing up and running. So
I have thoughts on both of those topics, and you guys should augment that for sure. So first is this comparison to Workday, as in Workday was built ground up with an in-memory paradigm. I think now that is a minimum requirement. So even if SAP is taking a defensive stance, at a minimum they should get it to work on HANA, right? That would be an absolute minimum requirement. Otherwise, otherwise Workday is anyway going after SAP on all these fronts, right? They have already kind of made fun of SAP for HANA, saying that, okay, we have been running in memory from the beginning. And Anil also went on a YouTube video, right, with some, I forgot what forum it was, and said, we are not attacking SAP on the fringes. We are going after the core. So definitely, there should be a balance. SAP should, at a minimum, get HANA as the database. I don't think there should be any question on that, and I'm pretty sure that Vishal will push that issue completely. And I think it's the right thing to do. Eventually, HANA should become the platform for everything, but I think SuccessFactors especially might be a nice, easy way for, I wouldn't say easy, but a nice first step for HANA to do that.
Also in the cloud, moving HANA into the cloud, because we have to remember.
Exactly. Because they've spoken about HANA on the cloud for a long time. This is their chance to act, right? I mean, this is definitely. On the mobility thing, I completely agree. Mobility applications for anything SAP provides in standard should be free. That's how I look at the world too. But where I see a mobility play in general is the third-party developers, right? The small developers who build add-ons. Those can be sold, right? I mean, it's a genuine case to sell those, and it might actually make the case for SAP to open up that developer ecosystem, because they cannot be a player on the cloud unless they have such an ecosystem. I mean, otherwise it's just an academic discussion. It just will not pan out.
Right.
But even to Dick's point, you brought up a great point. Is who has the developer network, could win in the enterprise. Even if SAP started something on SuccessFactors, and it feels like we're sort of it's mixed match and a lot of decisions have to be made. It feels like it's a long time away before we're getting to a point where developers will be able to develop on anything for SuccessFactors. I mean, if I understood what you read, Dick, would you sort of agree with that?
No, I mean, they have partners and they have an API. I mean, it's there, but I mean, as John was saying, it's dealing with openness. And you go to the SuccessFactors site, you try and find anything technical. There's nothing there. And I always compare what they're doing to what SAP is doing in terms of the openness towards the ecosystem. And if SuccessFactors wants to expand, or they want to bring SAP developers into using their technology, they have to open it up, because right there's going to be a different culture clash. Because in the usual, people say, yeah, SuccessFactors has the cloud DNA, but here SAP has the ecosystem DNA, and they have to push that over to SuccessFactors.
And we should point out that with SAP's ecosystem DNA, SAP does have colossal internal struggles making it easier for smaller developers to get involved already. So even with their experience, that's a huge struggle for SAP to make that possible. Larger partners and APIs, yes, but the smaller developers that are going to build the cool, lightweight mobile apps and industry-specific apps and things like that, that's not SAP's strength either, and it should be recognized. This acquisition probably won't solve that, but it will add a fascinating ingredient into the mix. We'll see, huh? We should probably dive quickly into collaboration, because collaboration is another interesting theme that is touched on by this issue. I had a client engagement with SAP around Streamwork earlier this year and around the collaboration strategy, and my impression is that SAP has definitely made some strides with Streamwork behind the scenes in terms of real contextual integration with business process, also some contextual integration with BI, things that I think add a real interesting aspect to this beyond just kind of a Yammer-like feed, but looking more carefully at specific processes where collaboration can help, and embedding those right into the suite product, etc., and into BI. Well, along comes SuccessFactors, which has a product that we first called CubeTree, but I guess it's called Jam. But it adds another piece into the mix and potentially threatens to either help or derail what SAP is trying to do there, depending on how you look at it. So, how do you look at it, Dick?
Well, I mean, I think they're complementary. I mean, if you look at them sort of at a very broad level, they're both collaboration tools, but the focus is a little bit different. I would see Streamwork as more of a collaborative decision-making tool. I mean, if you look at sort of what tools they provide users, that's their focus. I mean, you deal with SWOT analysis and things like that. And I used Jam a little bit, but it seems much more of a collaboration tool that's linked or associated more in terms of the functionality that Yammer provides. And I'm not saying that there's no integration between CubeTree or Jam and SuccessFactors. It's there, but I think the interesting thing is going to be to see how how Jam and Streamwork work together. For example, I'm in a Jam discussion with someone, and we have to make a decision. What do you do? It would be great if you jumped from a Jam conversation to a Streamwork activity, made a decision, and then jumped back. That's where I see the potential.
But then there's the question of who owns it, right? Because if Lars is in charge of on-demand, and if these are both perceived as on-demand products, what if Lars puts someone he trusts in charge of this whole area and changes Streamwork's roadmap or what have you? So I think that's going to be interesting as well, because in my view, Streamwork has actually made a lot of progress in terms of how to embed itself into SAP's products, but you could easily see someone coming in with a different direction there. So to me, even if the products are compatible, who's going to own it and drive it is going to be a very interesting drama, and hopefully a good outcome for SAP, because they do have some good assets there now if they can find a way to make use of them, right?
Right. No, go ahead, Jarrett.
I was going to ask John, what type of adoption does Streamwork have out in the marketplace? I know I've had a few customers kick the tires, but I don't have any larger customers that are using Streamwork, and I know it's went through some growing pains, but heard some positive things from you and Dennis lately, that it's that it sort of turned the corner, and I'm just curious as to where it sits in the marketplace.
Yeah, I don't have the numbers in front of me for like the exact account levels, and some of that may not be public yet. But when you talk about folks that have used Streamwork independently as a decision-making tool, et cetera, without integrating to ERP, that number's in the thousands. So a lot of SMBs have used Streamwork for those purposes. But there's different versions of Streamwork, right? There's a free edition and a professional and an enterprise edition. And the enterprise edition is still in the early stages of adoption, where it's actually integrated into specific areas within SAP, and you can start pulling in data, and the BI connectivity in 4.0 is still new, for example. So they're just now getting their first reference customers. We might see a couple at Sapphire. So it's a smaller group in terms of those who have actually adopted it for integrated enterprise tasks. When you talk about the broader free version, it's being used by many more companies, though it's a little hard to assess exactly what each one of them has done with it. But some small businesses use it independently of SAP. But that, in my opinion, is not Streamworks' sweet spot going forward. I think it really has to focus on providing deeper, almost like a TIBCO-like integration type value for collaboration, like along the lines of what Tibber does for enterprises, with integrating along the lines of specific business processes and applications. So you can essentially follow a process and then define whether it's an exception or a decision point within that process in real time, and have a record there of the decision that was made going forward, and pull it out of the email channel and put it into a documented place. So to me, that's the future of it, and that's still in the early stages. But the integration piece is one of the harder pieces, and there's already integration points with everything from CRM to BI and soon HANA, and those are the things that SuccessFactors Jam doesn't have yet, because that's what SAP's been focusing on.
So. Yeah, but I mean, I think we should also remember that there was an announcement, I think, last week that Yammer now has SAP integration. So they're coming into the mix as well. And I thought that was very fascinating to see really that Yammer jumped the gun on SAP, because SAP had the opportunity to do this long ago. And I'll be curious to see how the Streamwork team and the Jam teams respond, because this is I wouldn't call it an attack, but it's definitely competition in their area of the market.
Another story
given
to watch.
Given that SAP has two technologies that kind of overlap, right, or at least in a generic sense overlaps, I would actually think it makes sense to just keep them separate for now, and then go buy a middleware company before forming an overarching strategy. Otherwise, for foreseeable future, I see only patchworks happening. My own thinking is that they should go buy someone like TIBCO, and John knows that I've mentioned this 1,000 times before. But I seriously think that it is their weak spot, and they should go buy a solid middleware company and then have a strategy that includes all these things.
They have deepened their partnership with TIBCO, so that could make
no,
things
that
more
could be it,
interesting.
right? I mean, it might not be a purchase. Maybe it's a deep partnership.
But it comes down to confusion in the marketplace, because if I'm a customer, I thought Dick did a great job of digging through and trying to explain how they're different. But I'm no expert in Streamwork, and I'm still just learning about Jam. And to me, they seem somewhat complementary. They seem similar in nature until I read what Dick said. So that made me a lot smarter. And I'm familiar with a lot of the things that are going on in SAP. If I'm a customer, is SAP going to put the might behind continuing on with Streamwork, pushing Jam? Because really it's what the sales force is going to push, and what SAP is going to push, that's going to be the ultimate product that's going to continue, or maybe both continue. But it's going to need that focus, because customers I just think they'll need more of an explanation of how they can benefit them and how they're different.
Yeah, true. Okay, guys, I think we're in the loose ends wrap portion of our taping today. Did we miss anything? Did we cover it all?
I think one interesting topic we may not have covered is the culture. I mean, I'm just curious to get. I think it's going to be fun to watch some of the culture things evolve. Lars has come out, and he's he seems a very personable guy, and very outspoken. And I'm just curious to get your guys' thoughts as to how that will go with the the existing SAP folks longer term.
Well, I mean, I think he's going to bring in a little bit of energy. He's just going to give people a little bit of a sort of a boost, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how he responds to the other showmasters in the on-demand world, the people from Salesforce or from Workday who are also very outspoken. Of course, he's been doing that in his role as SuccessFactors, but what happens when he starts leading the cloud organization? How is he going to change? And I think that's going to be curious to see how he responds externally to other people in his new role, and how the SAP organization itself is going to respond to an external person coming into the company with this vibrancy and this energy. It's going to be curious.
Yeah, I'm very interested in this too, right? I mean, obviously, we can expect Lars to be similar to his current style, right, where he goes after people like Benioff and Anil and others. Now, will he be the only one from SAP who will do that, or will Jim Schnabe and Bill and Sanjay Poonen and Rob Koto and all these guys, will they also assume an aggressive stance? I mean, they have typically taken we'll do the high road attitude so far, right? Which has worked nicely for them.
High road plus wait. High road plus Forbes ad voice.
Plus Forbes. Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Sorry. Got to throw that in there.
You couldn't resist that. I see that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it remains to be seen on that front, on whether they can all take an aggressive stance, or will Lars just stand out as the lone guy who will say that.
Vijay, let me ask you, looking ahead a couple of years from now, how will you qualify this acquisition as a success? What would you need to see in terms of like your customers that you deal with? What would they define as successful?
I have a very simple definition of success, right? How many of my customers buy the solution? Will they open their wallet and pay the cash to buy this? And that's how I judged business objects. That's how I judge mobility, and I think I will judge SuccessFactors by the same yardstick.
Fair enough. Any other comments on that?
I very much agree with Vijay. I mean, customers spending their money and customers getting up on stage at Sapphire and those type of things is that's golden. And the more we can see of that and truly happy customers, and is really gonna show that SAP did the right things.
For me, what's going to be curious is to see as the acquisition evolves, how many people from like SAP are going to leave the company, to see how the organization changes, because acquisitions are always a challenge, and there may be some positions which will now be redundant, and if SAP and SuccessFactors can keep their people and assure that the disturbance is as little as possible, I would see that as a success.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's something that we should all be watching, because if Lars were to leave, or any of his key lieutenants start to leave, that starts to give a sign that there's some more internal tension that's being spoken of, because both of you guys really talked a little bit about some of the outgoing things about competitors, but I was thinking more of how does the culture work inside of SAP. Lars makes a decision that Jim Snabe doesn't agree with, and how does that all unfold? Because I think Lars is used to making the decisions and having that, them go with that. So how does that whole dynamic work? And, that'll just be very interesting to see from the outside.
Well, guys, I don't think we can solve the acquisition in one discussion, but we were able to pretty much all stay online, technically valid during this taping, so that's something. And I think at Sapphire we're going to get a much bigger view of these issues, and we're going to hear Lars and others speak more publicly on it. So maybe we'll regroup in the summer and see what we've learned from there.
Okay, sounds good.
Sounds like a plan.
Excellent.
Thanks for joining me, guys. It was a pleasure. Till next time.